This is What We Can Do Part 1. It's the immediate follow-up to our ecotherapy session, preparing and adapting bureaucracies for our future climate. The speakers are Heather Morgan, Signe Nielsen, and Annette Wilkes. As I mentioned earlier, Heather cannot be with us today. She is actually on my cell phone right now. Heather, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Hi, Heather.
I love it.
Okay, so Heather, we're going to see the reel that you put together for us. This is when you spoke at the film festival on Soylent Green in a double feature with Planet of the Apes. But all kidding aside, Heather, do you want to kind of set up and just speak to us for a few minutes before we get rolling here?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So hopefully I'm not super loud because I'm already not quiet. So anyways, I just want to say I heard that earlier today people were mentioning the Herculean effort with the large bureaucracies. And what I want to encourage all of you is that, these federal systems and the bureaucracies, as you know, the reason they're stacked the way they're stacked is it's layers of 100 years of building and statute and lots of stuff that we can't control. But what I can say is that what I learned working at headquarters was if you learn the system, you can work within the system. And so what I can say to all you guys, if it helps you and encourages you, and you'll see this in my presentation, is that once you can learn what the rules of engagement are, we'll find our way. And so I am a phone call away from any of you at any time when you're trying to do this. But understand that breaking down these federal systems and these bureaucracies, it does fall on us to learn more so that we can do more and do more quickly. So I hope that gives you optimism. The front end of my presentation will as well. And I hope you get some stuff from it that really helps you in general. I dearly wish I was there with all of you. Time means a lot to me these days. And I would love to hear what you're saying firsthand, but I'll get to watch the recording and hopefully I'll get to feeling better and I will see you in person soon enough. So I appreciate this opportunity. And that's about it. Charles, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I'll text you back in a minute. So with that, if we can cue up Heather's presentation, and we'll take it from here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Morgan, currently the Director of Climate Risk Adaptation for AECOM, New York City Metro. Our panel today is going to be presenting What We Can Do Part 1, Preparing and Adapting Bureaucracies for Our Future Climate. I'm going to share my screen here real quick so you guys can see it. Okay, hopefully there we got it. You can see everything. I'd just like to say up front that I have tremendous regret for not being able to be there in person. I've known Charles since I was 20 years old, and I'm going to be sad to miss his charismatic hosting skills. But anytime I've ever worked with Charles, it feels more of a homecoming than anything to do with work. I know Signe and Annette are going to do a beautiful and brilliant job completely without me. But this year, I've learned a lot about the value of being able to spend time with people. And so it makes me sad to not be able to be there with them and watch them do a great job and interact with all of you. Here you showcase your passion and the great work you're doing in risk performance landscapes and other climate crisis work, and interact with the audience. That's one of my favorite things. So even though I'm a little sad, what's more important is that all of you are there today, and that the Cultural Landscape Foundation is hosting this event, and that hopefully collectively as a community, we can start to pull together, form some relationships, and be able to move more quickly towards facing our climate crisis, since time is our biggest commodity with it. So let's move on to our topic. All right. So when Charles gave our team this topic, preparing and adapting bureaucracies for future climate, I think we were a little miserable because it was like, how do you present this without boring the crowd? Or how do you present it without completely complaining and bitching the entire time? And so our team, we had to get our act together a little bit, and we went out and we had some drinks and we shared our war stories and our earned scars and eventually laughed about it. And then we did what I think courageous women do best. We recognized our collective experience. We unpacked the content. We scaled it. We faced it transparently. And so for today, we've broken up this topic into 3 scales. I'm going to be addressing the federal system and large-scale bureaucratic scale, as well as the strategic planning and education engagement strategies for solutions due to my federal service and infrastructure background from the private sector. Sydney's going to be dealing with it and unpacking it from a private firm perspective, from planning to design, permitting at all levels, due to her robust portfolio of projects and her firm. And Annette is going to be unpacking it from implementation of design and construction, as well as the operation and maintenance tail of this new frontier of climate impacts we're going to have to face for sustaining our quality of designs. Every single presenter is going to be presenting issues up front and then offering solutions to those issues. All right, so let's move on to my section. So a couple things real quick too on my section. I have more text on my slides than I ever do. The reason for this is so that post this event, if it helps you, you guys can use this as a guide or just pick up the phone and call me. Some of this federal information is kind of dense. During this, I'm going to be using acronyms and vernacular language specific to use case and a few other things. So to respect our time slot, if you need some clarification, we can address it hopefully in Q&A. Or just pick up the phone and call me at some point. All right. Also, I'm going to spend a little time on this slide up front because some of these bullets that are on it will be mirrored on the following issues to come. But at the federal system, I really wanted to address this on the human side and what we're strategically doing that's making this issue so imperative that it needs to be unpacked and addressed. And then I couldn't resist as a designer really talking about what is the physical manifestation of this problem in our landscapes and how it's rapidly degrading our natural system and aiding in our climate crisis. So up front, I'm going to move a little slow and then I'll get some more cadence and move quickly. All right, so issue number 1, federal systems cannot move with the pace and agility and innovation needed to face our climate crisis. All federal agencies, but specifically the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, is completely dependent on a polarized congressional landscape. If Congress doesn't behave, we don't get authorized, we don't get appropriated. So in addition to that, there's a generation behind us where there was no progressive authorization language, meaning that the Water Resource Development Act, if you've heard of that, otherwise known as WRDA, that it didn't host progressive language aimed at nature-based features or applied ecology solutions or new ideas and a new generation of design for risk performance landscapes. The most recent WRDA last year that's been voted on by the House and the Senate does have more progressive language. But again, that is 2020, 2021. And again, we have 30 some years, even further back, of non-progressive language authorization language. Just because you're authorized does not mean you're appropriated. Those are 2 separate steps in the congressional approval processes. Most people don't know that way in which the federal agencies or the Corps gets appropriated. When the Corps is always held hijacked by Congress, whether it's appropriations or authorizations, it creates an inconsistency, break in projects, and many projects get paused. The Corps is also at the mercy of a very restrictive and prescriptive cost-sharing capability. I'll go into that a little bit more in detail. If you have an infrastructure heritage or study heritage of doing things like flood control projects rather than flood risk management, and you work at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or USACE, You have not been given the opportunity to do nature-based features or applied ecology as much as you would have liked. So understand that some of these staff have never been given the opportunity. If they haven't been given the opportunity, then they don't have the skill sets, the tools, or even the data management bandwidth to handle some of these next generations of design. And now I'm going to move into the design side. This last bullet kind of hits it off at the beginning. The infrastructure of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is not sustainable even without climate change. They have over $3 trillion in assets that's made up of a combination of dams, levees, reservoirs, flood walls, deep draft navigation channels, bunch of over 12 million in recreation acres. The list goes on. Currently, the agency can't operate and maintain its existing portfolio, yet it has a conveyor belt of feasibility studies that it continues to put out because we all know that we're constantly being in this negotiation relationship with flood risk. So what does this look like from a manifestation in the physical environment? On the right-hand side of my slide, this is the Fisk map from 1944. For those of you that don't know this, this is a geological sampling that was done that basically depicts, a survey and sampling that was done, that depicts the ancient courses of the Mississippi River. The colorful braids are basically the inundation and geomorphology patterns of the river for the last several billion years. Looking at this and seeing what we've done, we as Americans, we put homes on natural systems that behave like this. We've asked agencies, we've elected congressional officials that have directed our agencies like USACE to put dams, to put levees, to put reservoirs, to build perpendicular to massive systems like this. All well intended, but now we know more. So there's two items at the bottom of that graphic that I have for you. Static versus dynamic. The Corps of Engineers has been asked for a very long time to put static measures on dynamic systems like this. Not sustainable. The Corps of Engineers has also been asked to put single measures on comprehensive systemic problems. And I'm going to show the examples of this really quickly, because I know as a designers, we need to see tangible things. So here we are, up in the left-hand corner, Sacramento River levee system, part of a contiguous 3,000-mile levee system. Please look at the land use, look at the residential areas, look at the fact that the levee's on both sides of the river, okay? Bottom left, we all have, over the last 10, 15 years, have seen the complexity of New Orleans. We have sea level rise, we have subsidence, we have social injustice issues. We have a lot going on there. So I just wanted to make sure I emphasize New Orleans. Cherry Creek Dam, I always have to show this dam. It's one of my favorites to talk about. It's in Denver, Colorado. Cherry Creek Dam was built in the 50s. It was a dry dam for flood risk for Denver as a city. Someone 12 years later got approval somewhere to actually put water in it and retain it behind the dam. That environment is a flashy flood environment in a fast elevation canyon dropping space. And while building perpendicular to the river system, in addition, we decided to retain water and build homes around it. These are the things we have to change. We all know the hurricane season comes every summer. We all know the infrastructure heritage that is there. There's a network across the United States on the shorelines of groins, jetties, inlets, deep draft navigation, and it all gets impacted by this activity. Yet they're all static features, not representing the dynamic system that they're nested in. So why does a systemic response truly matter? So now you're going to see what keeps Heather Morgan awake up all night, practically sometimes, after working at USACE for 7 years and trying to unpack this from the private sector side. This is a Mississippi River Basin, real simple map showing all its tributaries. I'm going to start in the bottom of the graphic. New Orleans, as I mentioned, sea level rise, right? Subsidence, a river delta that's totally starved of sediment. A little bit north of there between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, right? We have Petrochemical Alley. Kate Orff and her team did a great book on this, and they can speak in much more detail on this than me. But at the same time, we have Petrochemical Alley just north of New Orleans. That area is producing large contaminants that's binding to our sediment, contaminating our water, our air, and a whole host of other things, our groundwater. Moving up the Mississippi River in this graphic, okay? There's a lot going on in this corridor, but I'm going to jump up to the Kaskaskia, which is a tributary on the eastern side of the Mississippi River as you get into Illinois and the north side of Missouri. Kaskaskia River, the Corps of Engineers dredged out the center line of it to deepen it for barges and transportation of trade and commerce. Once they established deepening that channel, it began a head cutting. That head cut is now moving at a mile per year, and it's rippling into the smaller tributaries that feed into the Kaskaskia, creating an assemblage of stream bank erosion and high extensive erosion issues, as well as fish passage impediment issues. All of those smaller streams go into the agrarian use of our zones known for corn and soybean in that part of the United States. All of those streamline edges are heavily eroded. That sediment with the pesticide from the agrarian practices has attached to it the contaminants from the pesticides. They flow down the Mississippi River and into the New Orleans Delta and create the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. To the west side of the Mississippi River, we have the Missouri River. The Missouri River is a highly sediment-loaded river, and USACE has built several dams along the Missouri River, which are retaining all of that sediment. The New Orleans Delta, as I mentioned earlier, is a delta that can't recreate itself because it's completely becoming sediment starved. So when we look at this, I have to ask ourselves, is this sustainable? In addition to that, the Corps is working diligently right now to build sediment diversion channels in New Orleans to spread whatever sediment does come down that goes through Petrochemical Alley and the network of things that I just mentioned in order to try to land create for further risk reduction in the future. We can do better than this. And we can do better than homes being below the top of flood walls. And we can do better than the USACE sinking unit. All of you can do better than this. And I need your help. We need your help. The USACE MAT sinking unit has been going for a very long time. It operates for 4 months of the year. They bring in on barges concrete units. They anchor them into the slope. They drag them up onto the slope, and it's used as armoring the levee system for when the spring comes with higher waters for flood fighting. We can do better than this. So issue 2, this is at the non-federal sponsors of USACE studies, NGOs, state and county municipalities, often cannot move with the agility and innovation needed to face our climate crisis. Again, this is a similar set of bullets. Our NGOs and our non-federal sponsors, they often don't know how the authorization language works. They don't know how the appropriations work. They are on the receiving end of restrictive and prescriptive cost sharing capabilities of the USACE and other agencies. They often can't afford the level of change that they need in their risk reduction without federal assistance. They themselves have inconsistent appropriations, right? And their staff hasn't really been given the opportunity. Therefore, their skill sets, tools, and their data management and everything else hasn't as well. And many of them are doing this for the first time. When we were lucky enough to get hired for Battery Park City Authority, BJ and Gwen leading that situation, that project there, they were doing this for the first time too. And our job was to empower them. So issue 3, this is about you guys. This is about us. This is about private companies and firms. We need to really get stuck in on those first 2 issues that I mentioned. And once we know that information, once you know that information, once we've educated ourselves, we then revisit our approach to the federal system and the non-federal sponsors in order to face climate change. We need to all help each other. Understand the authorizations, the appropriations, the damn restrictive cost sharing capabilities. We need to educate Congress. Right now, we don't get opportunities to go and educate Congress on why nature-based applied ecology and the next generation of risk performance landscapes is what we need. Our clients, we're strapped to the fact that our clients can't afford this stuff without federal assistance. We have extensive regulatory hurdles. Sometimes some of us are doing this for the first time. How many of you actually really dealt with flooding before Hurricane Sandy? We all have to lean into this. And change is hard. I have to give this example. Last year, when the new water bill was getting done, Portland cement lobbyists actually came and asked us if there's nature-based features and these all get authorized and appropriated. They are concerned that Portland cement will not be used as much for infrastructure projects. We had to take the opportunity to educate them on how it's about diversifying their product, that they can actually create cement and concrete, they can actually increase biodiversity and microvertebrate habitat, et cetera. But we had to tell them that this was the new dawn, that this was a new way for them to increase their services and form new relationships. But understand that they have lobbyists. Private companies need this education too, not just our clients, the products that we use. And so let's move into the solutions. Solution to issue 1, advance the federal perspective on nature-based applied ecology and risk performance landscapes. Identify the relationships you want with what agencies. Go into these situations with compassion, understanding, and education on what truly limits these agencies. Don't underestimate their passion to wanting to advance the federal perspective. Just because a federal service person hasn't had the chance to do nature-based features, it does not mean that they don't want to do it even more than you do. Empower your public servants, empower your federal public servants. Create products that simplify this information that can equip them with an alternative future scenario to what they're having to justify from an economic perspective for alternatives. Create workshops, education strategies, go to them. A lot of federal employees can't come to you. They have no way to bill it to the Treasury Department to come to you. So do these workshops, do these education strategies, educate local congressional constituents, because that rolls up into our representation in Congress, the writing of the authorizations, as well as the approval process for these projects. And this last bullet, which is really in the middle, I would love to see an advocates team form where you grab people that are in these federal agencies that want to get this stuff done as much as you guys and the rest of us. And what if ASLA or the Landscape Foundation or even this group pulled those people from these federal agencies and met with them regularly to discuss what are their challenges, what are their obstacles, what did they get traction, what's working, what's not. So I would love to see stuff like that. Solution to issue 2, advance the non-federal, the NGOs, the state, the county, the municipalities' perspective on nature-based applied ecology and risk performance landscapes. These bullets are very much the same as I went through on the previous slide, and it's just pivoting on it and putting that same level of effort towards this group of people or this group of entities or this group of clients. I'm going to move over to the right side of the page because this is super important, and I think it would be really useful for all of you that are listening for this. USA's feasibility studies, let's just say it's a flood project, okay? Or flead study. They are usually cost shared, and roughly the numbers are about 65% USAID, 35% non-federal sponsor. USAID is restricted to using current economic policies and formulation processes. And that, just to give you an idea what that sounds like, it's the National Economic Development Procedures Manual and their formulation process that they have to use to look at the array of alternatives, run benefit cost ratios, and select a preferred alternative. The non-federal sponsor can actually reject the USAID's preferred alternative, and that's known as the locally preferred plan. If the locally preferred plan is more expensive than the preferred alternative, then the non-federal sponsor covers the delta in cost. If the locally preferred plan is also supported congressionally or politically, it also helps Assistant Secretary of the Army sign on the chief's report to approve the findings of the USAID's feasibility study. A non-federal sponsor, to meet that 35% or 40% or whatever it ends up being for the study and eventual design and construction, can do things like in-kind services that count towards their credit of their 35% of the cost sharing. A non-Fed sponsor in-kind service could be them hiring you to do a watershed assessment, a stormwater management plan, bathymetric survey, an H&H model, an ecological restoration master planning, whatever is part of that study and its authorization. Or you could be hired to do some type of nature-based solution for the flood risk components. And all of that, whatever they paid you, gets to go credit towards the in-kind services. I'm explaining this because in this section, in this issue, and at this scale, you guys can build relationships at the same time while getting paid to do the work and then allowing that work to get funneled up into a locally preferred plan that's cost shared by USACE. And at the same time, you can be tackling it at the federal level that I explained earlier too. And so issue 3, solution, advance and educate private companies and firms' approach on how to collectively accomplish nature-based applied ecology risk performance landscape. Same bullet, but this is about all of us getting really stuck in, educating ourselves on what's truly limiting these clients, what is a locally preferred plan, what other funding sources are there outside of USACE? Please, there's others. There's BRIC, there's HUD community block grants that aren't as restrictive, workshops and education strategies, and educate congressional members. That's it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Sydney, and thanks for dealing with that massive amount of federal jargon and information, dense information. Sydney?